Hey, Home Care Ops Nation, Kevin here with Home Care Ops. As we cover different topics that various home care agency owners need to be aware of as they navigate through their journey from beginning to scaling to just really growing as a home care owner, we're going to cover a lot of different topics. And today we're covering a topic that a lot of home care owners might struggle with understanding, and that's insurance. So there's a lot of different types of insurance that they might need to consider. Some very early on is going to be extremely important. Some that you'll need to expand and grow in and maybe add on as you get bigger. But I'm not the expert in that. So today we've got Gavin Studner with Acrisure. Gavin, I know you've been in insurance for a while. How long have you worked with home care specifically and helped home care agencies?
Thanks, Kevin, for having me. It has been a while. I'd say about a decade I've been in insurance. However, I am proud to be fourth generation insurance broker. So I say, while I've officially been on the books for a decade, I've been in insurance since I was a wee boy at the dining room table learning about workers' compensation and found my way into the business along with the elders. So it's been a while.
Awesome. So with home care, right, there's a lot of different things that home care agency might need to consider. And we're not going to go too deep, but the whole goal here is just help them understand as they're getting started out, as they're hitting different stages of growth. Now, what types of insurance would you say are the most important that as they're opening their doors or maybe within that first year, still trying to get things figured out with licensing and other aspects of their business? Which insurance types would be the biggest priorities for them to focus on right out the gate?
Yeah, so I'll separate into two separate buckets. So you have your primary coverages, which are for the home care agencies that are right out of the gate, as you said. Then you have the ancillary coverages that would be recommended, but might not be the most cost effective for those coming right out of the gate. So let's talk about the primary right now. So the primary coverages you have, there's five main ones. You have the property, you have general liability, professional liability, you have your auto, you have your umbrella, then you have the workers' compensation. Now, we can expand on each of these if you think that this would be advantageous for the agencies.
I think maybe just kind of give me a little bit of understanding with like the liability and umbrella. I think a lot of people understand auto and workers comp lightly. Maybe they don't even know all the, maybe they don't understand all the details of that. But when you say liability, I know a lot of people might go and just shop around and get some different types of coverages. There's different liability levels and different considerations. With liability, what might be some things that you see they're missing when they get liability insurance? What kind of aspects that you see are really not there when you do a review of an agency's insurance?
Yeah, really good question. So from a liability perspective, your biggest exposure for home care agency is your general liability, professional liability. You're going into homes, your clients' homes. You don't really have oversight of your employees. So having the professional liability, general liability policy provides a backstop in case you were brought into suit because your employees were negligent in their duties for their clients. So general liability does not cover claims related to your work. It covers accidents that lead to physical injury or property damage, but aren't due to the negligence related to your service. An example of this would be your employee dropping hot soup on a patient's lap, or falling over your employee's misplaced bag. That would fall under the general liability category. Then on the other side, you have professional liability. That's where your coverage comes into play for claims that are directly related to your work. An example of that would be a patient that's hospitalized with an infection because you didn't change their dressings as often as you should have. Medicine mistakes, unintentional absence, temperature oversights in the bathroom if your employee turns the temperature too hot and it burns a client. That's where your professional liability comes into play.
Kind of help make up for those training mistakes or oversight issues with quality in the home. Awesome. Now, another question we had here that I want to ask was about maybe just some things that they kind of miss. And you and I were talking about this earlier, and different types of things with even auto. I know I said let's skip over auto, but a conversation really recently in a thread talked about the approach to having wraps on vehicles or having company vehicles, and I kind of broke it down into there's personal owned vehicles, there's company owned vehicles, and you wrote down like hired and owned auto. Maybe help me understand the difference there and what they might need to consider when they bring vehicles into the business, and the main things they need to factor in to decide, do I need to cover this? Don't I? How, what should I take into account when I do look for coverage?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about really quickly owned autos. So if a owner or an executive has an auto that's titled in the name of the business, you need insurance under the company name for your auto liability. Then separately, you have hired and non-owned auto. Hired and non-owned auto is where I see the biggest gap in coverage, because unfortunately, a lot of insurance brokers out there don't understand the ins and outs of the home care industry. Well, the big thing here with hired and non-owned auto is that a home care agency has all their employees out in the field, driving from client to client. If your employee is driving on behalf of the company, driving from client to client, then that means the home care agency is responsible while that employee drives out on the road. So God forbid your employee gets into an accident driving between clients, they are working on behalf of the company. And that's where the hired and non-owned auto coverage comes into play. A lot of home care agencies say, I don't need auto coverage because I don't have any autos owned by the agency. Well, this isn't for autos owned by the agency. This is for employees who are traveling on behalf of the company. It's a big deal.
Probably it helps supplement the workers' comp claim on that too, because they're driving for the company. Maybe something happens on the job, but it was with a vehicle that they own, so that might help out with the workers' comp claim too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, the employee will be covered by workers' compensation, which is they'll
but
be
the vehicle and anything that happened with the vehicle would be covered by their insurance, but also by the company insurance.
Exactly. So God forbid your employee gets into an accident and hits, a minivan with a mom and two kids. That's where this liability comes into play to protect the company.
In worst case, they're underinsured on their personal coverage with their car, because we all know that there's a lot of underinsured drivers out there, right?
Underinsured and also not insured. We find that unfortunately a lot of caregivers do not have insurance, so they don't have any coverage to provide the third party. So it's really important that home care agencies understand the importance of having this coverage.
Wow. Now, another one that you talked about as we're getting ready for this that sometimes gets overlooked is regarding employment practices. I know that in the home care space, a lot of people really struggle with recruiting, retention, and maybe policies and procedures. Like, what kind of things are being covered by an employment practice liability insurance?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. We know the home care industry has tremendous turnover. And with that comes exposure for lawsuits against home care owners. And that's where employment practice liability comes into play. It's typically called EPLI for short. And what EPLI covers is sexual harassment, wrongful termination, failure to promote, or discrimination based on age, sex, race, gender, religion, you name it. And not only does it cover the employer against lawsuits from the employee, it's also the client who alleges discrimination or sexual harassment from your employee. So it's not only first party from your employee, but also third party from your clients against your employees.
Well, I could see that would be really helpful, especially in states that aren't right to work states, right? There's a few states where it's right to work and they don't have to state a reason. They could just drop it, and then it's really hard to prove. But in the non-right to work states where they have to cite something, like some type of a coverage there might be really helpful.
Absolutely. And again, unfortunately, it's not a coverage that's talked enough about in the home care industry. And it's something that really should be more conversations around, given the high turnover rate and also the litigious environment that we're facing.
Yeah. Yeah, and people are looking for the big payday, right? So
An easy way to
sometimes,
make money, right?
yeah, you just don't want to open up for that opportunity and that risk. And that's the biggest thing we're talking about here is risk aversion. So in any industry, in any business, there is certain risks to take into account. Me just pulling out of my driveway, there's some risks to take into account. And so you got to look at that and have someone, as soon as you put yourself in a vulnerable position, that's the wrong time to be buying insurance, right? So you want to look at those risks and look at risk evasion and aversion with insurance. So these are really important things to look at and get quotes on and price out as a home care owner at various different stages. And as you grow, you might want to review that policy, right? So the policy I have on my car won't work when I buy a truck. I'm gonna have to get a different policy for the truck, right? So as you get bigger, more risk is there, more can be challenged, and so it might be worth looking at and doing reviews on this as well too. Not just at the very beginning, from the short list we're doing right here today at the time we have, but also ongoing, right? So, what factors or things might people need to take into account when they're looking at how much they should pay for insurance? We all know the commercials, right? 15 minutes or less to save 15%, and all this price gouging and price shopping. But you and I both know, because I bought enough insurance in my days, that I might see a policy for less, but it takes me getting into the weeds and using some translation tools to figure out like what's really missing, right? It's usually, if it's a real big savings, it's usually something I'm giving up. So what are some of the things that, as they look at pricing and they look at options for coverage, what key things do you feel they should really be comparing instead of just that dollar at the end?
Absolutely. I'm so happy we're talking about this because so often I see and hear different agencies ask other agencies, and I see it on home care ops as well, where there's a great interaction going on. Is how much do you pay for your insurance? And I'm gonna go against the mold and say this: insurance is not a commodity. It's not. It's your largest asset that you have. It's important to protect your business, and cutting costs on insurance. I certainly understand the need to keep expenses low, and insurance in the home care industry is the second largest expense line outside of payroll. But there is a risk that you are retaining with cutting that cost. And there are so many determinations when you compare cost between one home care agency to another home care agency that it's not really fair to compare. I mean, the size of one home care agency may be different from the other home care agency. So obviously the one that's larger is going to pay more in insurance because they have a greater exposure to losses and lawsuits. The limits may be different. The deductibles may be different. The location. I mean, if you have a home care agency in California compared to a home care agency in Oklahoma, well, the California one is going to pay more, even if they're the same size, because California is a more litigious state than Oklahoma. And then, like you said, the coverages. One home care agency might have hired an on-own auto. The other one might not. Insurance policies are this thick. And as my grandpa would say, they're more black than they are white. And they're full of policies, term, conditions, warranties, and exclusions. And everyone is different. So understanding what's behind the cost is extremely important.
I know you had deductibles in your list talking about that. I've seen some businesses get caught with deductibles where something happened and it was big enough that they had to take out a loan to make sure that they could make payroll because the deductible was so high. They're sure they were saving a ton each month, but the deductible was high enough that they had to come up with some money, take out a loan just to make payroll.
I call it the risk reward analysis. It's our job to put the options on the table and say, this deductible, you're going to save this much. At this deductible, you're going to save this much. And then it comes a risk reward analysis for each agency to decide, okay, how much of the risk do I want to retain? That's why I love my job as not only insurance, and risk management, because that's what it's all about.
Now, I don't know if you've seen this and across the board. I've experienced it in my own insurances. I've seen it in other friends' business insurances. It seems like premiums and things like that are kind of volatile right now. Things are kind of going up and down. There's a lot of shifting. which creates a ton of opportunity for people in your space because there's a lot of shopping around right now. What things do you feel affect premium the most? And let's look at this from the home care agency side, not the market side, right? Because the market's going to do what the market does. But as a home care owner, is how I want to look at this. Like, what things can I do to, from my side, um, keep my premiums less threatened for increase? I mean, even if I behave, like, there will be some increase eventually because of the market. But what things can I do on my side to help hold my premiums down as much as I can control it?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into the risk management part of my job that I love. Like you said, you cannot control the market cycles. You're going to have hard market cycles of insurance where rates go up. You have soft market cycles where rates go down. You cannot control the insurance marketplace and what happens, but what you can control is your risk management. And what we really focus on with our clients is engaging in a focused loss control and claims management strategies. And I call it the hierarchy of controls. So 5 things. Number 1, elimination. If we can physically remove the hazard, fantastic. That's exactly what we want to do. But it's not that easy to do when you're in a client's home to just remove a hazard like a dog. You can't remove a dog. Number 2, you can try to substitute. You can replace the hazard. What can we be doing differently? Number 3, you can institute some sort of engineering control. So you can isolate your people from that specific hazard. And then the one that I like the most is administrative controls. We can change the way people work. And that's an internal home care agency thing where executives really focus on how do I create a safe workplace environment so that not only my employees are comfortable and feel safe and backed by the company, but also my clients are also aware that this is the type of agency that we run and that we expect from our employees.
So they don't just focus on the safety of the home of the clients that they're going into. They also need to focus on the safety of the whole business, right? Especially for injury and danger to the employees and clients, right? Equipment, other things like that, best practices for lifting or other things. So good training, good policies, procedures in place is probably a huge part of risk aversion, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's organizational risk. Having a safety committee at your home care agencies, even starting at the very beginning, maybe it's just 2 or 3 people and 1 executive, but having that culture is so important from an organizational risk standpoint to lower your risk. And therefore, like you said, have more control over your premiums.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is be the reason for a premium increase. A lot of claims that could hit there. So if you see yourself getting into a position where things are happening, there's a lot of claims, that's probably something to really focus in and put some attention on, isn't it?
Absolutely. We are alerted when there are what we call red flags. And when we see a red flag, it's time to sit down and have a conversation about what can we be doing better from an organizational standpoint, and how can we help from a loss control perspective to really make you best in class, because insurance carriers want to work with home care agencies that are gold standard, best in class. And because of that, that's how you negotiate lower rates, is by showing this home care agency is a gold standard home care agency compared to their peers. So they deserve to be looked at as gold standard.
Awesome. I know we didn't really have this one covered here, but like, how often and what things and changes in a business should someone look to decide a proper time to reevaluate their insurance? So frequency and growth stages of business. Let's kind of tackle those here for when they should really review their policy or policies, because we talked about many right now. So
yeah, right. I'd say that if you're not having these conversations now, start it immediately. I believe in Murphy's Law. Don't wait. Have the conversation now if you haven't engaged. Remember, insurance isn't a commodity. So just renewing it every year, not having the conversation of, okay, my business grew significantly. That means my exposure and my risk grew. Let's reevaluate our insurance limits. Let's reevaluate what internal controls we're doing to have a safe workplace for our employees and our clients. I'd say have the conversation now.
Yeah, we have 50 employees now instead of 5. Probably time to look at numbers, right?
Your risk tripled for a potential for a loss. Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time here with this and your expertise you bring to the table. I know in the video comments we'll have a way to reach you. Also want you guys in Home Care Ops Nation to watch for content from Gavin. We will have blog posts that we're going to be publishing over time. You might see a few where he'll show up and provide some content for you to read about different things. Maybe go deeper in, because I'm sure some of you were like, what with umbrella coverage, or what with auto personal, versus company owned. I know I am. That's why I have a good insurance broker for my home and my auto and everything else that we cover, to make sure that we don't have issues on our end. And so we'll provide details. Get to him. You'll find some ways there. But even if it's not Gavin, these are some great things to take into account. If you have someone you're working with already, maybe bring these things up. We want to make sure that the less stressed you are in things that could come up, the better you're going to do in leading and guiding your team and building a successful home care agency. So appreciate y'all. Keep taking action and have a great rest of your day.